So yesterday, Brian Robison addressed the media one final time as a Minnesota Viking at his retirement press conference. And when I think back on Brian Robison's career, I think about a guy who wasn't the star of the team by any means. He was more so in the shadow of Jared Allen, respectfully speaking, and especially if you're the big sports networks, ESPN, what have you, or if you're a casual football fan, or if you're a fan of another team and you just think about the Minnesota Vikings just randomly out the blue, Brian Robison's name isn't going to be the first player that comes to mind. And he may not have had the sexy style of an edge rusher, defensive end type of player like Reggie White, Jason Taylor, or prime Julius Peppers. He didn't have any play like that, but man, did this dude make plays or what? Consistently speaking, especially when you needed it most, Brian Robison was there. And he didn't come into the league right away. He had to wait 4 years because Ray Edwards was starting opposite of Jared Allen. But then once he finally got his start, he was a rotational player for the first 4 years. And then in 2011, that's when he got his start. Brian Robison laid it all out on the field. And wins and losses, you can't really determine that. But when it comes to NFL players, as a fan, all that we want to see is that you're doing all that you can to be the best player that you can be on the field, and you're doing what's necessary in order for the team to win. And Brian Robison exemplified exactly that. It's crazy because in his stats, his 12-year career, Brian Robison racked up a total of 60 sacks, 287 tackles, 68 tackles for losses, and 112 quarterback hits. That's pretty damn good, okay? So Brian Robison, he had a pretty good career, and especially considering that he played the left end spot, considering that most of the quarterbacks that you're going up against, assuming that they're right-handed, playing left end, the viewpoint advantage is the quarterback, and he still made plays, man. This dude was a hell of a player. He had a hell of a career. I watched that entire press conference. I listened to every single word. It was super, super sweet to see. And that's why, and a loyal-ass player, and that's why the way that he departed, his departure from the Vikings just doesn't sit well with me. I know it's been a year, and maybe over time it will be like, all right, whatever. But you know what? It left a sour taste in my mouth, and here's why. After the 2017 season, you get to the NFC Championship game, you lose to the Eagles, whatever. You're going back into 2018 thinking, man, if we just make a few adjustments, if we get an offensive line, at least that's what I was thinking anyway. But if we make a few adjustments, hey, we can get back to the NFC Championship game. We can put ourselves back in contention to get a Super Bowl title, the first title in franchise history. Let's do this again. You bring in Kirk Cousins to upgrade quarterback at Case Keenum, and Brian Robison is along for the ride. So much so that in May, this was written by Ben Gessling of the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. The headline reads, Brian Robison will make $1.105 million in 2018 after accepting a pay cut from the Vikings. So originally, he was scheduled to make, going into his 13th season, presumably, he was scheduled to make just over $3.5 million. Instead, the Vikings came to him, and rightfully so. I get it. Hey, you're a rotational defensive end. We're bringing in this $84 million quarterback. I don't know if they signed Kirk Cousins at that time. But anyway, we need to free up some cap space. We're going to be in the Kirk Cousins sweepstakes. Whichever side of the coin it was with Kirk Cousins, we need to free up cap space. Okay, fine. So anyway, he goes from making a scheduled $3.5 million, Brian Robison does, to going to the vet minimum of just over $1 million. And he did it. No questions asked. In fact, he said, quote, I just wasn't ready to hang it up yet. He could have retired. I just wasn't ready to hang it up yet. I needed to give it one more shot. It was a tough decision. It was something where I had to sit back and think about what was right for not only myself, but my family. So he went to his family and said, you know what? We're going to do this one more time. They're scaling back my contract. And you know what? Yes, he's still a millionaire, but still, you need to scale back your purchases and expenses. We're going to bring in just over $1 million. Okay, fine. And then in September, so about 3.5 months later, this was written by Chris Wesseling of NFL.com. The headline reads, Vikings releasing 12-year veteran Brian Robison. And I immediately, when I saw that, I went, what? What? It didn't cross my mind not one time that there was a chance that Brian Robison was going to get cut. Really? Cut? And you know what? You want to see a guy like that go out on his own terms, and quite honestly, you want to see everybody go out on it. Everybody wants to go out and leave their job on their own terms. It doesn't happen to everybody. Very few times that it does happen. But with Brian Robison, it's like, okay, the NFL is a business. I get that. Take that aside. If we're going to leave it to strictly football, Brian Robison was still an effective player, even coming off the bench. In 2017, Brian Robison had 20 tackles and 4 sacks. To get 4 sacks to not start, that's pretty damn good. He can still be a rotational player. What's the problem? And they just cut him. That was a loyal ass dude, and still look what they did to him. So I'm not here to just go on a rant or anything like that, but that departure, it was just really unfortunate to see. In hindsight, in 2018, he wouldn't have missed much as far as what was on the field. But it's like, man, you want to see a guy like that go out on his own terms. Brian Robison, salute to your player. One of the most underappreciated Vikings players of all time. And that brings me to this list. The top 7 players, the top 7 most underappreciated players in Vikings franchise history since I started following this team in 2000. So 7th grade, junior high, I started following the Minnesota Vikings. So anything before that, before 2000, I wasn't privy to. But this is the list. The top 7 most underrated players in Minnesota Vikings franchise history since 2000. Starting with number 7, Michael Bennett, running back for the Minnesota Vikings from 2001 to 2005. Was serviceable running between the tackles. Wasn't great. Wasn't even good, maybe below average, just barely. But serviceable running between the tackles. But what really made him valuable, this dude could catch out the backfield, bro. Think about it like this. Jerick McKinnon was essentially Michael Bennett 2.0. And you know what? Michael Bennett was, in my opinion, he was just too far ahead of his time. He would be dynamic. He would be really, really good in this era of the NFL. So that's number 7, Michael Bennett. Number 6, Jim Kleinsasser. Fullback, tight end, halfback, whatever it is you want to classify him, a hybrid of different positions. With the Minnesota Vikings from 1999 to 2011. A beast of a human being. This dude wasn't just strong. This dude was country strong. There's a difference. You could sit there, go to the gym, and go from a skinny dude and just bench press forever and get super strong and compete in the Mr. Olympia challenge or competition, whatever. That's all well and good. There's a difference between that and country strong, where you could just be fat. I'm not saying Jim Kleinsasser was fat. He was definitely a big dude. You could just be fat, not even work out, and just extend your hand out and all of a sudden just push people out the way like you're Magneto without even trying. Just push. Oh, I just fell. That's how strong Jim Kleinsasser was. A hell of a blocker. Was kind of like a, you know, I'm not going to say, I was going to say like a poor man's Mike Allstott, but I'd be forcing it. I'm not going to say that. A hell of a blocker, Jim Kleinsasser at number 6. Number 5, we talked about him earlier. Ray Edwards, 4th round pick, very athletic, very solid edge rusher, much like Brian Robison was in the shadow of Jared Allen. And speaking of which, Brian Robison comes in at number 4. We just talked about him. Number 3, most underappreciated Vikings player of all time since 2000, Ryan Longwell. Let's have an honest conversation right now. You know how I wasn't around for the Gary Anderson missed kick, but even like since then, the last couple of years, actually the last several years, we've been saying, man, this team just can't get a kicker. They can't get the kicking position right at all. We've been having kicker troubles forever. This is ridiculous. You want to know the last time that we had a kicker that had a large enough sample size, a large enough body of work that's been on the team consistently where you really didn't have to worry about the kicker at all? Was Ryan Longwell. This dude, Ryan Longwell, let's bring up his stats here. Ryan Longwell, you know what? His last year in 2011, he had a down year, 79% field goal. But guess what? Before that, going backwards, 94.5%, 93%, 85%, 84%, 84%, okay? So the dude was a hell of a kicker, He had one down year. Okay, go into 2012 and say, you need to prove it, damn it. But you said, no, we're going to get rid of you. Get the hell out of town. Really? You drafted Blair Walsh and cut Ryan Longwell. And it's interesting because Ryan Longwell, he had one down year. You cut him. Get out of here. Blair Walsh has so many goof-ups on the biggest stage out on the football field but guess what? The Vikings, they will come out there every single time where it's like, yo, this dude Blair Walsh, we might have some trouble here. And Rick Spielman, they would get up on that podium. Nah, man, we believe in Blair Walsh. He just needs to get his confidence right. He will get it together. We firmly believe in him. And every single time they would say that, he would get back on that. They would trot out poor Blair Walsh on that field, and every single time he would line up to kick, you would just watch with one eye open and just expecting. Time after time, chance after chance, Blair Walsh got, but Ryan Longwell, one bad year, get out of here. Ryan Longwell is number 3 on most underappreciated Vikings list since 2000. Number 2, speaking of kickers, Kai Forbath. People talk about the Minneapolis Miracle. The only reason the Vikings were in a position to get the Minneapolis Miracle to still possibly win the game was because of Kai Forbath kicking a clutch-ass 53-yard field goal to put the Vikings up with, I believe it was either just over or just under 2 minutes left. If he misses that kick in the playoffs, it's over. You lost. But Kai Forbath made that clutch-ass kick, and what happened? You cut his ass for Daniel Cross. Come on, man. Come on. Underappreciated. I appreciate you, Kai Forbath and Ryan Longwell. And number one, the most underappreciated Vikings player in franchise history since 2000. Jarius Wright, wide receiver. You benched his ass for Cordero Patterson before you finally used him his final year as the gadget player he was born to be. Okay, fine. But even with Laquan Treadwell, you benched Jarius Wright, a damn good receiver. He never got the opportunity that he deserved with this team. Every time they put him out on the field, he made plays. He's Brian Robison. He made plays, but guess what? He wasn't the 6'3" or 6'4" prototype wide receiver, Laquan Treadwell. And Laquan Treadwell isn't any good. So the disrespect they did to this dude, Jarius Wright, is unbelievable. So anyway, get that out of there. Oh, actually, before I do that, an honorable mention. So that's my 7 players. Michael Bennett, Jim Kleinsasser, Ray Edwards, Brian Robison, Ryan Longwell, Kai Forbath, Jarius Wright. Honorable mention, Chris Hovan, for being the only relatively decent, okay defensive player in the early 2000s. That defense was crap. As far as the Minnesota Vikings early, it's funny because now this Vikings is kind of different. Not even kind of different, completely different. This era of Vikings football is all defensive based. Now in the draft they addressed offense, so hopefully it's a little bit more balanced. But the last couple of years, 100% defense based. The first era of Vikings football, as far as when I started watching in 2000, 100% offense. It was unbelievable. The defense was crap. I'm thinking of guys like Corey Chavis, Brian Russell. Who else do we have on defense? Oh, my God. I can't even think of it. Who else do we have? Oh, I can't remember. So, anyway, Chris Hovan for being the only he wasn't really great. He was okay. He wasn't bad. For at least being an okay player on a crap-ass defense, Chris Hovan, honorable mention. Let's get that out of there. Lastly, before we end this show, the last couple of weeks we've been talking about cap issues. Vikings, they got cap issues. Kyle Rudolph, are they going to trade him to free up cap space? You need to sign Garrett Bradbury. You don't have enough cap space to do so. And they're both not budging. The Vikings and Kyle Rudolph, they're both looking at each other like, what you going to do? You make the first move, player, and then all of a sudden Eric Kendricks was like, I'll take care of it. And no, he didn't take a pay cut. He's just reallocating his money to a signing bonus. Okay, fine. And now it looks like they signed Garrett Bradbury. The team made it official. And now it looks like unless the Vikings decide to go ahead and still trade Kyle Rudolph, it looks like we have our team. And it looks like we are going to have a 2 tight end set formation with Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith. I'm happy. I'm happy as hell. Okay, you can keep Kyle Rudolph too? No big deal. Okay, let's get it together and let's see what happens. So anyway, this was a lot of fun. Brian Robison, salute to your player. Loyal ass dude. I loved watching him play. We will miss you. Number 96. The only thing that I found goofy about him was that sack celebration. The little fishing rod. Yeah. Follow me on Twitter at realistic_Randy. Facebook at realisticrandy. Saturday's podcast will be on my personal YouTube channel. We'll see you then.